Teachers, what is the most disturbing thing that your student has ever done? I used to teach at an alternative high school, so a lot of my students were kids on probation, kids from areas with a lot of gang violence. Many of them had issues related to the fact that they were both born drug addicted, that kind of thing. I had a student who I had worked hard to build a good rapport with. One Friday, he looked me in the eyes and told me, completely calmly, that I shouldn't come to work on Monday. He kept telling me that he didn't want me to be there on Monday. When I finally pressed him on why I shouldn't come to work on Monday, he told me that he was going to blow this up. I said, "You know I need to report this, right?" He told me to do what I had to do. He was arrested right out of my classroom and I had to be interviewed by the police. It was honestly really traumatic. I ended up calling out Monday, even though I knew nothing was going to happen because my anxiety went through the roof. I called out a lot after that and found a new job shortly after, but I still have a great deal of compassion for that student. I think about him often. I hope he's okay. Kids in my mom's class tried to poison another little girl while they were having a feud. They tampered with her snack and put things like sharp staples and hand sanitizer in it. They also put pencil lead in it thinking it would harm her. Obviously, ultimately harmless, but the intent was there. I'm glad one of the little boys involved came up to my mom and let her know what the plan was out of guilt. They're in the 4th grade, old enough to know better, and to know what eating harmful things can do to a person. I used to teach PE to 3 to 5-year-olds. I have this one kid who would come with his friend from kinder. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said that she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once, I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around with the gym screaming the F and C word at the top of his lungs while trying to punch and kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he would like to kick another student, or the ball. One time he got so violent that I couldn't get him away from other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and chest. The only part that he could move was his head, and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone, he would scream with laughter wearing the biggest shit-eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy fuck, I will never forget that kid. I had a 3-year-old with the same thing. Would have to hold him while he was evil laughing and try to headbutt me. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the entire school year. One of my students in high school came by one day and handed me a pop vinyl figurine from one of her favorite bands. She said I could have it, and I, not used to random gifts, asked her why she was giving it to me. She said something along the lines of she doesn't need it anymore, so I thanked her and I told her to have a good day. Following day, she killed herself. It immediately became clear to me why she didn't need the figurine anymore, and that still bothers me. Do you still have the figurine? Poor girl. I do. I'll keep it forever. I taught 3rd graders for a year, so the kids were around 9 years old. It was a couple of days before summer holidays, and I asked the kids what they were going to do during summer. I got to this one girl and asked her what she was going to do, and she happily announced she was going to Germany with her sister and her parents. I asked her what they were going to do in Germany, and she said that she was going to ask people if they had €1. I was like, what? And she proceeded to sit down on the floor with a really sad look on her face, stuck out her hand to me like this, and said, "See, like this. Please, miss, do you have just €1? I'm hungry." She really didn't see anything wrong with this. I'm pretty sure she didn't really understand what she was doing. I was quite alarmed by this, so I informed the other school staff. It turned out that even though they weren't actually poor, her parents were regularly taking their $2 to Germany over summer, where they would make them beg for money in the streets. I heard the girl and her sister got pulled out of school shortly after that, but I don't know what happened after that since I don't work there anymore. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching other kids, his friends, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he never had been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after, having no idea doing what he did was weird or upsetting. Recently, one of my students told a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that, she's pregnant." And the first student said, "That's the point." These were 5th graders. This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems, so this was quite a shock. Something similar happened to me when I was pregnant with my first. A student told me that it was going to make me lose the baby. It's the only time I've ever really flipped out on my students in 7 years of teaching. That student had some serious issues, though, and by the end of the school year, I was the only teacher that he would talk to about the shit that went on in his life. Bouncing from foster home, abuse, etc. He left a letter on my desk at the end of the year saying that my unborn child was incredibly lucky to have me as a mom. I ugly cried at my desk when I read it. I teach 4-year-olds part-time, which means that I usually do art and recreation in the afternoons. There's this girl in my class, let's call her Mary, who is a tiny terror that frequently runs around making the other kids cry. Her moves are very calculated. A hair pull, kicking a toy over, snatching art. She waits until the other kid is crying before she relents. She never wants the toy, just the reaction. On the other hand, this boy Jim is her polar opposite, and often the voice of reason in my class. He's a gentle giant, the biggest kid in preschool. He shares happily, he's kind during playtime, and probably the most thoughtful human that I've ever met. Well, one day during outside time, Mary kept targeting Jim. He was really good-natured the entire time. She would, snatch a shovel from him, and he would respond kindly by saying, "It's okay, you can have it. Toys are for sharing." Stuff like that. Remember those giant red and yellow cars that kids sit in and pedal with their feet? The yard has 5 for the kids to share. Mary was leaning up against a wall, and Jim was pushing one of those cars. The kids like running around with them, so that was normal. Jim was probably a good 30 feet away from her when he suddenly started accelerating. He aimed like a homing missile, pointing straight at poor, clueless Mary. I genuinely believed he would turn away at the last minute or something. I was wrong. He slammed the car straight into Mary, effectively crushing her against the wall. I will never forget how long it took her to inhale. I was shaking. I thought he cracked her ribs. Her entire back was bruised, but thankfully no further damage. I was too shocked to be angry. After passing Mary to my co-teacher, I turned to Jim, who was sulking in the corner, and asked, "Why'd you do that?" He just shrugged and very calmly said, "I was just trying to take care of our problem." 100% scared of this kid now. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I was doing group time, singing songs, reading a book, and all the kids were sitting on the floor. One left to blow her nose. She came back, walked through the crowd of kids to get back to her spot, grabbed a quiet girl's hair, and kept walking. My assistant thought it was a mistake, but the girl kept walking. She even bent at the knees and yanked while the poor long-haired girl screamed. The girl had no remorse, and it would be so unpredictable. She would look into your eyes, but right through them. It was a stressful year. At the first school that I taught at, I had a girl come up to me one day and say, "Robert has a knife." I pulled Robert into the hallway to talk to him about it. He said that he didn't have a knife, but he did have a box cutter. I asked him why he had it, and he said, "Because I'm tired of Chris." Chris was an annoying suck-up, but he wasn't really mean or bad to the other kids. I asked Robert on what he was planning to do to Chris. He said, "I'm gonna get him in the bathroom." I usually took the class to the restroom after lunch, but I didn't that day because they were being rowdy in the hallway. I took Robert to the office, and after hearing the story, the principal chewed him out. She then called Robert's mom, and she chewed him out on the phone. Here's the kicker. Robert knew that he was in serious trouble. He knew that what he was planning was wrong. He just didn't care. Not in a false bravado macho type. He literally didn't care. I hate to predict a kid's future criminal endeavors, but that kid scares me. By the way, Robert was 8 years old at the time. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God. But according to his mom, it was not loose. He sat at his desk and he grabbed it and he yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said that he wasn't able to read anymore. So could he just go put his head down? He was sent to the nurse and his mom was, horrified. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife. If that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive things. Moon students on the bus, etc. But the predatory behavior was the worst. He'd wait as students left the room so that he could be next to last, turn off the light, and backhand the last kid in line. Often his own cousin, who was the most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends, or force his cousin to do so in case they were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, and I'm really not sure what happened to him. I had a girl who couldn't be in the classroom and had to be on a one-on-one with me at all times, but she couldn't be in the classroom because she was extremely violent and deliberately stabbed another child in the eye with a colored pencil and laughed. The other child had to be hospitalized. When we asked her why she did it, she started laughing again and said because I wanted to. She would also randomly attack kids in the playground and in the halls. When they put her in a one-on-one with me and she couldn't do that anymore, she started attacking me on a daily basis. She was 4. A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter. They immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter out of his hands and said, "Quit being an asshole." Then sat right back down for the lesson to continue.